Football made simple. Become great at your craft by finding ways to make it simple for those around you. This is the Coaching 101 podcast hosted by Find a Way Productions with your co-host Daniel Chamberlain and Kenny Simpson. Welcome back, coaches. This is the Coaching 101 podcast. I'm Daniel Chamberlain, co-host, here with Coach Kenny Simpson. How are you, sir?
Doing well. It's a little rainy out here, which is probably good. Keeping the temperature down a little bit and excited. We've been blessed with this podcast to have, it seems like every time we bring on a guest, I'm just overwhelmed by the quality that we're able to get. Just two goofballs from Oklahoma and Arkansas, and we're getting all these guys coming on our podcast.
You may see some video quality reduction tonight. It is vacation time for the Chamberlain family, and I am at a local joint that let me bum their Wi-Fi and drink their cold beer. So we are going to tear it up in the podcast tonight on vacation. We'll go ahead and introduce our guest here. Coach Courtney has came to us as just the world kind of sent him our way. So Coach Courtney, we're going to go ahead and let you do your introduction here, man. Just talk about your coaching experience and why you're here.
Well, first, I just want to know, is that PBR over your left shoulder? I think that's PBR, isn't it?
That is a past blue ribbon. It's over the shoulder. It's reversed in my camera too. It is.
I didn't know if they were a title and presenting sponsor of your podcast.
They are tonight.
They are tonight.
Thank you, PBR. We're gonna tag them and everything. It's a good chance for them to get in.
I graduated Ole Miss. When I was at Ole Miss, I coached some junior Olympic basketball, and I was, I've always wanted to coach. And the reason is my dad left home when I was 4, and my mom was married and divorced 5 times. And my 4th daddy shot at me down a hallway with a .38 caliber pistol. I had to dive out a window to save myself that night. And that's kind of where I come from. And the only good men in my life were my coaches. And I don't know where I'd have been without the men who coached me in baseball and basketball and football. And so when I went to Ole Miss, I got a degree in psychology, and, I thought I might want to save the world, but I decided I just wanted to coach. And so I graduated college, and I got a job at a school out in the county in Tennessee, and was 22 years old, and the head coach there was Wade Griffith, who played at Ole Miss, and then he played offensive tackle for the Colts back when Burt Jones was quarterback back in the day. Joe Washington was tailback. And a week and a half before the first game, he left town. He took a job at a bigger school somewhere out of the state, and they said, "Well, Coach Courtney, you're it." And so at 22, I became the head football coach of a high school football team. I didn't even know all the kids' names yet. I mean, I'm just going to be real honest. And after that, it was in my blood. Married my wife, had 4 kids in 4 years, and I was making about $17,500 a year. And that includes cutting the grass. And I just couldn't do it for a living with 4 kids anymore, but it's all I wanted to do. So in Tennessee, you can be what's called a non-faculty certified coach. You can be a head coach. You can be everything that you can be. I don't mean like a volunteer dad. I'm talking about you can not work for the school and still be covered under all the association rules and insurance, everything, to go through all these classes. And so that's what I did. So I went into business, but I continued to coach. And I opened a company in 2001 in a really dilapidated area of Memphis called North Memphis. And the reason I opened it there is because I needed land for what I was doing. And that's where the cheapest land in the world was. And at the same time, the opportunity came to coach at a school called Manassas High School in North Memphis. So I was starting my business, moved over to Manassas. And when we got there, we had 17 kids, and they'd won 4 games. Their previous 10 years record was 4 wins and 95 losses. And went to work. 7 years later, we had 75 kids on the team. And we were 18-2 those last 2 years. And after that last year, then I moved on to my first son's school where we won a state championship. And then I moved on to my second son's school, and then was COVID. And at COVID, it really hit Memphis hard in terms of all the public school shutdowns and the inner city stuff you dealt with COVID. So football quit. And then I had an opportunity to go back this year and didn't, because of this podcast I'm doing and because of my business. And then I'll be back in it. So 31 years since I was 22 years old, and off the last 2, and I miss it, and I'm ready to go back this fall, but I can't, but it'll be next fall. So there you go. There's my coaching background.
So you mentioned a podcast, and we have kind of an obligatory thing here. We need to hear about that. Obviously, if you come on a podcast, you got to talk about your podcast. So what's going on there?
I don't want to get overly political on a football show, but I was particularly angry one day with our politics and with the people in the media. There was something that happened, and I can't remember what it was, about a year and a half ago, but I watched Fox, and I watched CNN, and I watched Newsmax, and I watched CNBC, and all 4 of them were talking about the exact same thing. And you'd have thought they were all from 4 different planets. You would really have thought it was the same exact issue, and nothing they were saying about the obvious issue was even close to right. Everything was shaded, and I'm just so sick of it. And so I was being interviewed about my book, and on that day, and somebody said, what do we need to do to break the proverbial chains? And I said, in every city, in like Memphis, and every city in the country, there's neighborhoods you drive by or overpasses you drive over. When you look down there and you see kind of the poverty and the despair and all that, it's the place you don't want your wife to have a flat tire. It's a place when you drive by, you see all that, and you don't want your car to break down. And then when you pass by, you kind of look in your rearview mirror over the side of that viaduct, and you think, man, somebody ought to do something about that one day, as if that sentiment matters. And I think we need to start kicking that rearview mirror about 15 degrees to the left and start thinking maybe I ought to do something about that one day, because the government has proven woefully inadequate. And these yahoos in New York wearing fancy suits and clothes, using big words nobody ever used really in real conversation, they ain't doing nothing. And I really think the only thing that's ever going to fix what ails us is if an army of normal folks, just guys like you and me and the people listening from Oklahoma and Arkansas and Memphis and everywhere else, just sees issues and tries to fix it, just does what they can in their little corner of the world. So I said that in this interview, and then these people from Chicago came by and said, hey, we've been thinking about what you said in that interview about a year ago. And I was like, uh-oh, I must have cussed or something. And they said, no, well, we liked what you said. We want to start a podcast called An Army of Normal Folks, where you go around and instead of interviewing all these fancy A-listers and all the people in New York and LA and DC and politicians, we just want you to interview normal folks who are doing extraordinary things, that are not doing things because they're paid to or because they're anointed, but normal folks who have money troubles and family troubles and difficulties, and they do great things not because they're perfect people, but they do them despite the difficulties that they have, and they just are exacting some measure of change for people in their community. You interview them. And so I said, well, that sounds good. And so we started doing it, and it released about 6 weeks ago. We've been number 10 in the country on Apple, and have had a lot of success. I've been doing a lot of press. And so that's what it is. It's a podcast called An Army of Normal Folks, trying to, the whole idea is this: I'll shut up and talk ball. I don't care. I don't care if you're Black, white, Asian, Latino, gay, straight, Christian, Jewish, Muslim, Republican, Democrat. I'm trying to think of all the things we separate ourselves into. It's kind of like,
well, you'll be going all day, Coach.
well, hell, it's
we're a
kind of
very
like
divided country right now,
it's
unfortunately.
kind of like 3 deep position groups, if you really think about it. There's just a whole bunch of categories, right?
Yeah.
Well, it doesn't matter how we separate ourselves, but we do, and we're finding it increasingly difficult to get along or agree about anything. And I mean, you got gay Republicans and Jewish Democrats and Christian liberals. I mean, we even got our position groups going cattywampus. People, we're not even, we're two platooning here. I mean, it's just going every which way, and we can't agree on anything. But I can tell you one thing we can agree on: we're all human. And it seems to be that no matter who you are, where you're from, how you think, how you vote, or how you worship, everybody in a community can gather around somebody who does something good for another human being, regardless of who you are, where you come from. And so the idea about the Army of Normal Folks is not only to tell inspirational stories that are interesting and funny and make you laugh and hopefully make you think, but also to have people join this proverbial Army of Normal Folks by subscribing and getting on it, and build a community of people who are willing to say, you know what, enough with societal preconceived notions, enough with all the noise. I'm going to celebrate decency and humanity. And so that's what it's about. Okay, there you go.
Well,
That's awesome, Coach.
I like to our team. I talk about football might be the last place where we can teach that to the youth, you know, or sports in general. It's still getting corrupted. We're still fighting. And I'm sure you see that the more you've been coaching. We may talk about that later in this podcast. But when you walk inside the 53 yards wide and 100 yards long, you don't care that your teammate might be whatever. Is he wearing the same color as you are and he's on your team? That's really all that matters. And so I think this is going to fit really well with us talking football, is because a lot of coaches that are listening to this, you are the Army of Normal. You're the last, like, people that can think. These kids watch TikTok and then they watch the news and they watch whatever. They think the world's full of idiots, you know, but you might be the last person standing there that gets to teach kids how to be responsible, be respectful, you know, accept the guys on their team. And so I think this is going to go really, I'm excited now hearing you kind of talk a lot about that. First of all, I'm going to go listen to the podcast. So Army of Normal Folks.
Hey, I got one listener off this deal. I'm good.
You got 2 on this one. My wife will probably download it.
All right, good.
But I think that's going to fit really well with where we're going to go with this podcast. And I think Daniel and I, while we do talk a lot of football, I think that the goal of every coach should be that we should be the last. We're almost, unfortunately, you know, I thought about being a youth minister before I got to coaching. And my wife said if I worked for the church or went to the Army, she wouldn't be my wife. And so I said, okay, what's the closest thing to being a youth minister?
Easy on that, going to the Army thing.
Sorry about that one, but she knew, because she knew I'm a military brat. So, but here's the deal. The closest thing to that is a coach. Like, kids want to be with you. Like, they don't want to go to English class, but they want to go play football. And so you have that opportunity. I think guys that are listening to this, make sure you're listening to Coach. Obviously, he's had a lot of success in the field, which we'll talk about. But probably the reason he's had that success is because he has the mindset that he has.
I believe, gosh, I don't know how to go for it. I started my business in 2001 with $17,000. And I've got 130 employees now, and we do business in 42 different countries, and we did about 80 million in sales last year. That's the truth. And I did that at the same time. I'm married. I'm fat and redheaded, and my wife is gorgeous, and she's not blind.
There's hope. There's hope for me. I'm gaining weight, and look, my wife is gorgeous, and I hope she stays that way.
You're doing fine. You look great. So we had 4 kids in 4 years, and they're all out of the house now. And at the same time, I was coaching ball. And I guess what I'm trying to say is I grew my family, I grew my business, and I grew my ball teams all the same way. And it's with fundamental tenets, fundamentals of character and commitment and integrity, and all the things we better be talking about as leaders, young men. And one of my mantras is the greatest measure of the success of a leader is the actions of the followers. And I mean that as a boss. I mean that as a father and a husband. And I mean that as a coach. So if we've got a problem and our kids aren't acting right on our team, you know, it's the mirror we need to look at first. Same thing in business, same thing with our family. And so when you talk about what you were talking about, the things that we need to be doing, I do not care if you've got the best schematics on the face of the planet. If you don't have the hearts and minds of those kids, you ain't winning nothing. And when you look out at what your kids are doing, not only on the practice field and on the game field, but off the practice field and in the hallways and everything else, if they are not acting like they need to be acting, you need to remember the greatest measure of the success of the leader is the actions of the followers. I believe that with everything I am.
I've heard very, very similar, not that one exactly. That's a good one. I've heard very similar in the military side as well. You know what I mean? Like,
makes sense.
Character reflects leadership, right? Like that's part of it. You are who's leading you. So that's an amazing one, man. I like it a lot. I'm gonna steal it. I'm glad you said it twice because I was about to ask you to say it again, so our listeners could hear it a second time, and I'm gonna run with it.
Good.
Well, then I think it's time we go on. Coach, you want to go ahead and tell us how to simplify some football for our not only our players but our coaches, our assistant coaches, or maybe there's an AD listening. His head coach needs some help. How would he simplify football? Sure.
So this is our ad section here, Coach Courtney. We'll be real quick with it. So Coaching 101 podcast is sponsored by Findaway Productions. Findaway Productions houses offensivecoordinatoracademy.com, all things schematic, offensively, workbooks, templates, the full academy, and the new group we have over as well. It also houses Defensive Coordinator Academy, all things defense, Defensive Line Academy, Defensive Academy, both the workbooks, all the templates, everything you might need. Finally, it also is the host to fbcoachsimpson.com, which houses the free magazine headsets for all coaches, all types of articles. We got about 24 articles now, about 33 books over there, ranging from scheme to workbooks, to real books, to everything you might possibly want in coaching. We're going to talk about Coach Courtney's book here in a bit, but if you're wanting some coaching books, you can go over to fbcoachsimpson.com and get one. Daniel, you got a couple more?
Yeah, absolutely. Adaptable Physical Therapy is the little clinic in Grove, Oklahoma. My wife and I have opened on Star Wars Day, the 4th of May. So, we're hoping that gives us some good things going. The force may help us moving forward and drawing some customers. My wife she practices. She is the PT. She's Dr. Chamberlain. I am just Mr. So it's now Dr. and Mr. Chamberlain when we're introduced. I'm completely okay with that because I picked this life. But she practices PT 2.0, which essentially just means you're going to get one-on-one care from the exact same provider every single time you go in for PT. Everything is done, not everything, but 90% of it is done with some type of a weight, a load. We built, the first thing we bought was a rack from Rogue or whoever the heck we bought that one from, and a barbell. And you go to work. When you go see Dr. Chamberlain, she's not there for you to patty cake through a recovery. You're going to go and you're going to do some work. Your recovery should be greater than whatever your everyday activity is. So that's what she firmly believes, and that's what she does. So adaptable physical therapy. I don't know the phone number off the top of my head, and I'm not going to look it up. So you can Google us, find us on the Google machine. There's another one that lives somewhere in like New York or something. Their name is way longer. It's not as cool as ours. We're at adaptablept.com and on Twitter at adaptablept. You can find us there. Also, athleticspeedandmovement.com. That is a program that Joe Daniel and I are putting together. We're taking Dell Basket's 45 years, 1978 to now. I think that's 45 years of experience of training NFL players, collegiate players, high school kids. Some people hire him to go, help their 10-year-old get faster, fixing running form, giving them fundamentals of how to run fast, and overall increasing speed is his goal, and that's our goal as well. We've now taken what used to be only in person. That's all he did was in-person training. We put it on the internet, and you can buy it right now until, I don't know when this comes out, but I bet it's after July 31st. So we're our half price, unfortunately, is probably ended by now, but jump over to athleticspeedmovement.com. You can sign up. It's a subscription-based thing. And because Coach Basquette made us, each year you're going to get the next level of speed training. So you need to practice it for a year. It's a 12-week program. You can run it 2 to 3 times, run it in spring, run it in your summer, and run it during the season and see if you don't increase your kid's speed. He brought them down and did my kids down at Stillwell when I was coaching there in Stillwell, Oklahoma, and we videoed it. And from day 1 to the end of day 2, we saw extreme results. Not necessarily in a 40 time or a fly 10 or any of that, but just watching these kids learn how to run. athleticspeedmovement.com. Coach Courtney, why don't you go ahead and pitch your book here, man? Because we'll get through this and we'll pitch it again.
Hold it. We got a problem. And this episode only, PBR, Pabst Blue Ribbon.
That's right. You missed PBR.
PBR, if you aren't reaching out.
Right there. I mean, okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
What are you even doing? Let's go. I'm for it.
Coach Courtney, why don't you talk about your book a little bit? Coach, I know you put out a book, and just hear a little bit about what you got.
Called Against the Grain. It's subtitled as a Coach's Wisdom on Character, Faith, Family, and Love. And each chapter is a tenet that I think you need to carry yourself with, which is character, commitment, integrity, the dignity of hard work. Nothing earth-shattering on the tenets themselves. I define those tenets in layman's terms, not what you would find in a dictionary, but what I think it is in my terms. And then the body of each chapter is I don't want to be preachy, so I illustrate how those tenets and adherence to those tenets have either worked in my life through somebody I've coached or managed, or in my life through somebody that coached or managed me. And we kind of explore a true but metaphorical situation or story that kind of illustrates how that tenet can lead to a more meaningful life. And the reason it's called Against the Grain is obviously I'm in the lumber business. And so the grain, I'm a football guy, and ESPN never shows 25-yard runs where the ball carrier just kind of glides out of bounds. It's always the one where he sticks his foot in the dirt and cuts back against the grain. And the point is, we can be a forward-thinking, evolving society without abandoning the core principles that got us here in the first place. And it's time we start going against the grain of societal preconceived notion that if you don't think like me, you're my enemy. And if you don't believe like me, I can't talk to you. I think it's high time we start talking about these tenets, politics, race, faith, creed, and we do it without the fear of being canceled. And we just do it in a civil, non-threatening way. I think our society is under attack from a lack of courage to speak up. But it's also under attack from people who speak up from behind a keyboard and want to be incendiary and don't have the temerity to say it to you face to face with some civility. And I think we need to start having those conversations. So that's what the book's about.
Awesome. Well, I've always kind of said that I think if we could put the whole world in a football locker room, you would see issues getting fit. I mean, you have people there that you've coached.
Just so true.
And if you put, I've said this to Daniel before, if we could just get football coaches as president and congressman, we wouldn't have debt. We would have people
run the power
together. Because I believe
about Russia, president. Run the power.
Guys like me, wing T guys, we like each other. We figure it out together. You don't get to go in a coaches meeting and come out and be in disagreement and just point fingers. It doesn't work, but it does in Congress. I'm sorry, this is not a political.
But it's true that you can take two groups of 65 or 70, 15 to 18-year-olds led by two groups of 6 to 10 grown men and you can work for an entire week studying covertly film about one another, and then spend 2.5, 3 hours absolutely mauling one another and matching each other's wits. But when it's over, those men will respect one another, and those young men will shake hands and put their arms around one another. Now, if we can do that, why can't we do a little better in DC?
Correct. Amen. Preach. All right. So now we're going to get to the football portion of this, although we can keep that train of thought going because I think guys listening need to hear that. So Daniel put me into his first podcast ever that Daniel has trusted me with the questions. So if they're horrible, blame me. And if guys that are listening, if they're good, I just want to do a poll at the end of this on YouTube. You can say, you do the questions from now on, and Daniel has to do the answer.
You're trying to take my whole job, Coach?
No, I was going to say you have to be the answer guy. I'll just do the questions. Okay.
All right. So you waited for the fat redheaded guest to pull this.
Well, Coach, all that.
It's been happening to me my whole life.
That's right. Well, I figured Daniel's over there. Who knows how many PBRs he's had? He's on vacation. You know, I'll do some heavy lifting for him here. By heavy lifting, I mean, Coach, we have 3 questions.
I appreciate it.
That's what I came up with. So we got 3 ones that I think we can talk for a while about. But I did make them football specific. So it's football podcast. We got to get to that. So you took over at Manassas, and all I heard was 4 and 96. So first of all, most coaches don't take that job. And the coaches that do take that job are probably 22s. They don't know any better, like apparently, you were. And so talk about some of the issues that made that group 4 and 96 and some of the things that helped them change, like realistic ones that a coach that's walking into an 0 and 10. I got guys texting me right now that are taking jobs in July that are walking into what most people would say are dead end jobs. And they ask me, Coach, what do I do? So, Coach, what do they do?
All right. Well, this is a shameless plug, and I want to say it very clearly. I don't make enough money off this thing to buy a 6-pack of our title presenting sponsor, PBR. So I'm not saying this to make any money. All right. You should watch Undefeated. It's on Netflix. It's an Academy Award winning film. It's the whole reason I'm on the phone on Zoom with you today, because if that hadn't happened, I wouldn't be speaking all over the place. I wouldn't have the book. I wouldn't have the podcast, none of it. But you should watch it so that you can understand this. I was 34. I'd been coaching for 12 years. And the reason I was there is because it was close to the place where I was starting my business. It was convenient, really. I had no idea what I was getting into. I just wanted to coach ball because was my passion. North Memphis is the 5th poorest zip code in the United States. The demographics are fewer than 50% of the people there own a vehicle. Less than 1.3% of the people that live there have a college degree. And an 18-year-old male is 3 times more likely to be incarcerated than he is to have a job by his 21st birthday. That's what I walked into. And and they'd won 4 games in 10 years and had 17 kids. Y'all, I tell that this is one of the only places I'll be able to say what I'm about to say, and you'll understand what I'm saying. This was in 2003 when I showed up. They still had suspension helmets in the locker room.
Mm. Yeah,
solid.
Suspension helmets, Coach.
Daniel probably doesn't even know what that is because he's not been coaching that long.
I only do because I have Google. The internet lets me know what these archaic things are.
With 3 nylon straps, and the helmet suspends on top of your crown. That's
actually the Army still issues those, I think. So
yeah, I wore them in like 6th grade. They had nothing. No home games because there's no field. And our practice field was left field of a softball field. That's when I say abject poverty, nothing. So what did I have to overcome when I got there? Everything except this. Kids are kids. The human spirit is not determined by the zip code at the time of your birth. It doesn't matter where you come from. You hadn't been spoiled by the world by 14 yet, usually. And if you give kids a level playing field and an opportunity, and you coach them just like you coach kids anywhere else, meaning you give them a set of standards, you hold them accountable, you teach them, you love them up as hard as you beat them up, you teach them football, but you also teach all that stuff that's going to last long after the days of football are over. You can have success anywhere. It's not about what they used to do or where they come from or who their mama is and everything else. They're just kids. They're just kids. So I didn't approach them any different than I approached any other group of kids I ever had. And it took some time, but I will tell you this, there was some talent running around out there too. And you know, I mean, our first year we went 4-6, which I thought was, you know, whatever, but that matched the previous 10 years. And then the second year I had to get rid of some folks, and I decided I was going to start with a culture change. And we started a bunch of freshmen and sophomores, and we went 2-8. Then we went 4-6 again. Then we went 7-3, and then we went 9-1, and then we went 9-1. I had kids on that team that play in the NFL now and played at Alabama and Ole Miss and all of Southern, all over the place. And the point is, these are the same kids that were 4-96, the exact same kids from the exact same spot. We just leveled the playing field, gave them an opportunity, gave them a little coaching. And the answer is, it doesn't matter where you are. If you've got a set of kids that want to play ball and you want to coach them upright, you can have success.
Yeah, well, what I want to point out to a lot of coaches is this, because I think you hit it. You know, you're here now. You've got a literal movie about your career. So I mean, like most coaches, that'd be like the pinnacle. I mean, if they ever did a movie about mine, it'd probably be, you know, I would be played by Kevin Bacon or somebody like that. That's not real good looking, you know. But
John Candy was dead, I don't know.
There you go. So
I mean, somebody can talk fireworks for sure, right?
That's right. It'd be, who knows who it'd be. Maybe, I bet it'd be Nick Cage, because he's about as
Hey, if Nicolas Cage wants to play me, I'll reach out to that. Come on now.
But what I want to point out to the coaches listening was, you're the guy that's kind of been at the pinnacle here. You know, you've done this turnaround. It didn't happen overnight. And I think a lot of coaches, when they walk into 0-10, I was the same way. I was 27 when I took my first one. But we walk into these jobs, because I took a job at 31, close to your age you are. Didn't have the talent you guys did, but we didn't have near the poverty. We're pretty close in rural Arkansas. And I thought, if I'm being honest with myself, I thought I was smarter than everybody else. And I thought, because I was so smart, we would win games and it would be quick. You know, and that's not how things work in real life. And so many coaches get discouraged when they were 0-10 and they go to 4-6. That was a dang good year for those kids. And I think sometimes coaches get so upset with it doesn't happen overnight. You know,
something I like to tell young coaches is, this is a little known story about me, is my freshman year in high school, I tore my shoulder. And my favorite teacher was my math teacher. And he also played 4 years of football in North Dakota and won 4 state championships. He didn't coach football. He was a math teacher. He did the stats, but he was a really good football player. And he was my favorite teacher. And he happened to be also the chess team coach. And so my shoulder was messed up. I didn't have anything to do. So I started playing chess. Long story short, we ended up pretty good in chess in high school. But the reason I'm telling you this is, I see a lot of young coaches that approach football like chess. They think if it makes sense on paper and the moves go here and the scheme goes here, then everything's going to work out. Well, that does work in chess. And I know, because I'm pretty fair at chess. But when you're playing chess, the pieces can't change their mind. The pieces, a bishop cannot back down from a knight if it wants to. And a pawn in chess cannot overpower a rook just because it has a lot of heart. It just can't do it. But in football, those things can happen, and it can happen for you and to you. And if you start approaching football as if everything you put on a board is going to make everything all right, and you forget that that is secondary to the human beings that you're trying to lead, you're not going to be successful.
Yeah.
I noticed that a lot of times these jobs we're talking about, these 0-10s, these we kind of call them stepping stones, right? Because unfortunately, I just came from one. I just came from a school that is, man, they're on their like 6th head coach in 8 years or something, right? No one stays there ever. and there's reasons why, and it's not the coach's fault, it's not the kids' fault, but them kids pay the punishment all the time. That's why when we took over, they were 4 wins in 5 years. And then, coach, it's not as bad as yours. 496. I can't imagine that they would even have a team after winning 4 out of 100 competitions. Like that's insane to me. One of those things, just the relationship with the kids and letting them know you're going to be there. And that's hard. My experience was hard. It's hard because the administration changes their minds, right? Maybe they're that pawn that's going to go up against a rook, and all of a sudden they change their minds. And now you ain't the coach, or you're not the assistant coach, or whatever it is. But I'm a firm believer in relationships over everything. It doesn't matter. Answered a question recently. It was basically, does performance come first or relationships come first? And I said, relationship, and how are they connected? And I said, relationships better drive performance. You're loving them up, they're probably going to play a little harder for you. Performance better never drive relationships, not ever, right? You can't quit loving a kid because he doesn't show up on Friday nights. So I'm super interested now in just hearing your tenets of football and how you're instituting those to let them kids know, like, I'm here. All that crap's over. All that leaving's over. 496 is over. And I'm pumped because relationships over everything. Like you just said, show up, love them up harder than you coach them, or as hard as you coach them up is great.
I'm supposed to be pitching the podcast here, but I'm telling you, watch Undefeated.
Yeah, I will. We will. We probably as a family. My wife needs probably a little next.
You and everybody listen to this thing will identify with it. But 2 is humbly, I learned a lot. All right, Coach, second question.
Yeah, second question is one I'm not so sure you're going to like as much. I've got a good one for the third one here.
All right.
But when you had a lady reach out to us to bring you on, which is why we brought you on, and I know that both of you guys have not watched it, so shame on both of you, but they said that basically, if you guys are listening to this, the coach would be comparable to like Ted Lasso, the TV show. So I know that maybe you two don't watch it as much, but if you've watched Ted Lasso, and now that I'm hearing you talk, I can see why she kind of made that comparison, because my wife and I are giant Ted Lasso fan. We've watched all 3 seasons. That's literally the only reason we have Apple TV. So we're about to cancel it now because Ted Lasso is over.
Unless Apple wants to become a sponsor.
Yes.
Apple
or Ted Lasso. Either one would like to come on. But basically, the idea of Ted Lasso is a lot of what you're talking is relationships over everything. It's believe in everything. So here's where I want to kind of go with this. When you walk into a situation that looks hopeless, and I know you kind of already talked about making relationships and doing little things. Can you give us like maybe 1 or 2 stories, and you can leave out some names if you need to. I don't want to embarrass anybody, but 1 or 2 like stories from what you walked into that first year and things that you did that had an impact that maybe you didn't even know would have an impact. Because if you watch the show Ted Lasso, it's filled with all those little anecdotal where he does these little bitty things, and man, they make a huge impact on all these athletes.
One is accountability. I absolutely believe kids want discipline. And the ones that resist it the most are the ones that want it the most. But I take I take a little different approach. I want the kids to hold me and my coaching staffs accountable too. If we are not doing our job, we cannot expect the kids to do theirs. And so one of the things we do with our captains is we have captain coaches meetings every week. And it is an opportunity for the captains to bring anything to our attention that may not be copacetic with the team. And if any of those things have validity to them, then we address them as a coaching staff. Likewise, if there's some things going on with the team, not high discipline things, but maybe a few attitudinal things, we're very careful to say, look, we don't want you to go in the locker room and start hazing people. That's not what this is about. It's a mentoring thing, is that we communicate those things at first through the captains to give the team an opportunity to address them. And so what evolves through that is respect. And the respect is that the kids know you're going to hold them accountable. The kids know the buck stops with you. The kids know all those things, but they also know that you're willing to listen to them. That, it may be your way or the highway, but before we get to that place, you're going to have ample opportunity to convince me otherwise. So that's one that we institute always immediately. Make sure everybody understands it's still a kingdom, right? It's not a football is not a democracy. It is a monarch. All right. But I just feel like if you're going to ask the young men on your team to act like young men, then you have to give them the opportunity to be young men.
Let me get you into this too, coaches. You're kind of going. So one of the hardest things I have as a head coach, I lose sleep over this. And I'm sure you do too, because you were in a poverty area too, because I know if I let a kid go, I mean, you mentioned between year 1 and 2, you had to let some kids go. I know a lot of times if I let that kid go off my team, he's probably dropping out of school and that the whole trajectory of what he might have become. So it's a heavy decision. It's not like I'm working at some private school where he's going to go play something else. So when I let a kid go, so I want to ask, because there's probably a lot of coaches in that same boat. That's hard. I mean, I've had a lot of really emotional times getting rid of a kid.
It is, that is one of the themes in the movie Undefeated. It happens, unfolds, and that is the hardest thing. That's the hardest decision to make, because if you cut them loose, not one part is more important than the sum of the total. So you can't let the team suffer because of one. But in the same respect, are you there to coach football players? You're there to coach people. And if you've got a person that you know is hurting and messing up, have you really exhausted back to the effectiveness of a leader is the actions of followers. If you've got a kid you've got to let go, are you absolutely sure you've exhausted every single thing in your fiber as that kid's mentor, leader, and coach before you let them go? Because if you haven't, it's still on you. And so
I even Coach, I don't mean to cut you off, but I even go as far, and I faced this 3 times in 3 years, unfortunately. Some kids need you more than you need them.
Big time.
They may bring your program down, but you're bringing their life up. And I think that's huge. And some coaches have numbers and they have tryouts and they've got, you ain't on the team if you aren't producing. I've never been a part of that. This year, I may be a little part of that. I've hired on with a school that's got a lot of kids. But I've never, in my 3 years, experienced a situation where we didn't have at least one kid that needed us more than we needed him. And I think that, Coach Simpson, I've been to your clinics now and you discussed a kid that
if you're not in this for that kid, you're in it for the wrong reasons.
Absolutely. Yep.
I mean,
I always say those trophies, man, they get cobwebs. They're dusty. Nobody cares after about 15 years, probably, right? And they're like, well, that was 15 years ago. Look at college football. Look at the NFL. I'm a Cowboys fan. I'm a Dallas Cowboys until I die. And what do they talk about our trophies? Well, those are in the 90s. Well, so that trophy will grow old and it'll grow cobwebs and it'll be done and no one cares. That kid will care forever.
I want to answer Coach's question. The second thing on question number 2 that I did when I was a younger coach, I really believed in the old Stoops dart series and all of that. And the reason was I thought it was pretty easy to teach 4 linemen to block down and a backside to pull and to read that backside in and then to run all kinds of, RPO and option off of it. And I believed in it a lot and I'd won with it a lot. And so that did not fit the kids at Manassas. And I thought it fit everybody. I didn't know how it couldn't possibly fit anybody. And one of the things that I did that was very successful is I listened to the kids on the team with my eyes and ears, show me what they were good at. And then we built our scheme around the talent I had rather than trying to fit the talent I had into a scheme I believed in. And
100%.
That was a very hard lesson as a young coach for me to learn, but it also went a long way to the kids seeing, he'll listen to us. And I didn't have a quarterback. I had a bunch of athletic kids, but I didn't have a quarterback. And so, what do you do with that? And, my first 2 years, I didn't have a single kid over 200 pounds either. So what do you do with that? And for me at the Manassas thing, one of the things, by year 7, I had a bunch of really good players, but those first couple of years, it was, here's what I've got. Let's throw everything out and let's just coach what we got. And so, accountability and growing together and learning together, I would say were the 2 most important things starting out there.
Good deal. Good deal. All right. Question 3, Coach. You ready? The last one I've got for you. This will kind of open up probably more what you've been doing a lot in your discussion is in my opinion, every generation kind of has its event. For my generation, it was 9/11. For other generations, it's whatever, where nothing is the same after. Well, for the kids, it's COVID. Like the kids' generation, you have the pre-COVID and you have the post-COVID. And coaching in that world, and I know that you've kind of gotten out of coaching, but you're going to get back into coaching, but I'm sure you still can see how our society has changed dramatically since COVID hit. It's different. Coaching kids now, 2023, as opposed to 2019 even, is very different. And Daniel can probably speak to that a little bit if he coached before COVID. So how can we continue to apply a lot of the things? Because here's the things that kids are supposedly don't want. I don't agree with this, but what they're being pushed on them, that they don't need accountability, that they can do what they want to do, that they don't have to, so all of this stuff before was relatively mainstream. Relatively mainstream. I think before 9/11 or 9/11 to COVID kind of time, it would have been normal to say we should respect each other, and it would have been normal to say you should show up on time, and it would be normal to say all of these things. That's not becoming normal anymore. So how do you suggest coaches go about dealing with that? And that's a big fact.
Well, first of all, one thing I need you to know is that COVID stopped all of us from coaching in Memphis. They shut it down, right? And in a city's environment, when you've got kids who may be the only positive thing and the only thing they have to do after school is football, then basketball, and you literally shut it down and school's over, and so there's no going to class, There's no going to football. There's no going to basketball. And these, 16, 17-year-old kids that are already in a difficult position on a fence are kind of cut loose. It's a lot to come back from, right? And so that's just to let you know on that. On the on the question about the whole COVID thing, I know that I really do like to think of myself as someone who likes to listen and consider and is pretty open-minded about things. But on this particular instance, I'm pretty stuck in it in old school. I really believe the best thing to do is to set all your players in a gymnasium on one side and all the parents of those players in a gymnasium in the same place, same conversation, but not having their children sit next to them so that mamas and daddies and kids can't bat eyes at each other and tell them what your expectations are. And I think you tell the parents. I don't even think you talk to the kids. I think you stand in front of the parents, just let the kids listen. And I hear what you're saying, Coach, about all that mess, but I think a lot of that's starting at home. And I think the kids are going to push the limits. They're going to get away with what you let them get away with. And a lot of this mess that you're talking about, I just feel like they're getting away with it because their parents are letting them get away with it. And I think the parents need to understand what the expectations of their kids are going to be. And conversely, what the expectation of those parents is going to be if their kid's going to play ball for you.
Right.
And I would be willing to take a step back on wins and losses and go with the right kind of kids and parents at first and rebuild from there. It's kind of like Charles Barkley said, when Charles Barkley's daughter turned 16, Shaquille O'Neal was giving a bunch of crap about, boys are going to be coming over and everything else. How you going to handle it? And Charles said, well, I've got it figured out. That first one that comes over, I'm going to invite him into the house. I'm going to take him into the living room. I'm going to shake his hand and introduce himself, and I'm going to beat him to death. And he said, after that, I figured where to get around. I think that there needs to be a reset on a lot of this mess you're talking about. And I think it needs to happen with the parents. And I think where to get around. I really do. That is how I would do it.
Yeah, I've found a few things, and I've been around long enough. There are a lot of parents that want you to be the bad guy. They may not say it.
It's true.
Especially young moms, like a single mom.
It's true.
They want you to be the bad guy. And a lot of times, if they know you're willing to be that, and they can be the nice one when the kid gets home, and you see that a lot of times even with married couples, like usually not all the time, but the father is kind of this.
Coach, that is so true. It's true. So set the standard with the parents. The kids will follow. Yeah, and you will lose a few parents and a few kids, but I'd rather lose them before season ever starts than in the middle of the season with some. And now I do understand these coaches listen. A lot of them are thinking, boy, I don't know if I'll get the support of my administration on that. I don't know if I'll get the support of my athletic director on that. I don't know if I hear all that, but if you don't have discipline and you don't have your kids being held accountable, I do not know how you can be successful at anything as a football coach. So you might as well go ahead and establish it early with the parents. And that's what I would do. It's absolutely what I would do.
Yeah. I'm just kind of told younger coaches, hey, have few rules and make sure you enforce all that you have. And then you and I are in a different position, Coach, because we're older, we're more established. So a lot of young coaches, I'm speaking to young Coach Simpson. I made a lot of moral sacrifices for better players when I was a young coach. So I know we're on the back end of our career. It is easier for us to say this. And I didn't even listen to all this when I was young. I wish that I had. I wish that I had listened to this, because here's the deal. I made a promise when I was probably about mid-20s or so, when I made the move from Montgomery, Alabama, up to Arkansas, that I might get fired from a lot of jobs, but I'm never going to sacrifice what I think is right for the kids. And if that means that school doesn't want that, I'm okay with that. And I think a lot of coaches, unfortunately, especially young ones, are so worried about, what if I get fired? I hate to break it to you guys, but there's a shortage of good coaches. There's a shortage of coaches, and there's a huge shortage of good coaches. You'll find a job, and I think a lot of guys just need to be reassured of that. Like, if you get let go because you're at a bad place, and I don't mean bad place because Coach mentioned it, kids are kids everywhere. Kids are the same.
It's not the kids. It's oftentimes the district or the administrators making a bad place. But you also got to remember, if you're in a coaching search, an interview is a two-way conversation. You need to be gathering information as well as giving information, and find out if this is a place that's going to support the proper kind of coaching. Because if it's not, don't waste your time. And there are plenty of places all over this country looking for young, energetic, bright guys that want to do things the right way and care about their kids. And I'm going to tell you something. If the parents see that you care about their kids, you have the best interests at heart, and they see their kids starting to buy into you, they'll follow your lead on this accountability stuff. They will. And you're right. A lot of times they want you to be that guy because they don't have the guts to be it, which is fine too.
Right. Right. That's just, to me, that's kind of what I was thinking about post-COVID stuff. Daniel, this is usually where you kind of chime in and get us moving. I know Coach has a date night with his wife, and apparently I have a date night to watch Undefeated with my wife coming up here. So we probably need to wrap this up just a bit to let him.
Absolutely, man. Yeah, Coach, man, I really appreciate you coming on. There's a lot of this last little section here too, just about, young coaches do have a lot on their mind. Their record matters to them, right? When you're year 10, 15, 20, the average will be there. It's like a batting average, right? Batting average over a season matters, but in a single game, it don't really matter. And I think young coaches have to respect that a little bit themselves, right? If I go out and go 2-8 because I kicked the 3 best kids off the team, no one cares about your moral compass. They're gonna say, we hired you to do a job, and that was win games. I'm full support of what y'all are saying, and that's hopefully that's where I'll be, no matter where my first head job is just run with what's right, and everything else will catch up. I have to assume. Coach Simpson, why don't you go ahead and tell us how to simplify everything except for administration, parents, winning and loss records, all the things we can't simplify, but how do we simplify football for our coaching staffs and our kids?
Sure. Yeah. Coaching 101 podcast, sponsored by Findaway Productions, which houses offensivecoordinatoracademy.com, defensivecoordinatoracademy.com, and fbcoachsimpson.com. And on fbcoachsimpson.com, we talk about dealing with admin. There's a material there, the head coach workbook, that I'd recommend all you young coaches go get. Basically, what I've done is I've taken my coach's manual, put it all on there, and then put templates for you to fill in and do your own coach's manual. Maybe it'll save you a lot. That's a 20-year coach's manual project that basically I've put into where you now have it and can make your own. So maybe you can avoid the 20 years of screw ups that I had. So Daniel, back to you.
Absolutely. Coach Courtney, once again, we just love that you got to join us tonight. I know when we got on, we were like, what are we doing here? But man, I'm so glad we had you. This is what football's about, right? Relationships first, and taking care of the kids, and everything else will follow. And luckily, you're an example of that, where you just took care of the kids in a place that was not taking care of kids, obviously. And then now you've got a career that's on a dadgum movie. So, it isn't the Ted Lasso. That's what we were told originally. It ain't Ted Lasso, but we do have a documentary that we can go watch that tells us when you do the right dadgum thing, good things will happen to you. And maybe someday somebody will put a camera on you, and I bet your kid just acted better for the documentary anyway. So I'm going to watch it and have, I'm going to be a little.
Just remember this. Undefeated has nothing to do with wins and losses. It's about not being defeated by your circumstances.
Right.
Absolutely.
So that's it. And guys, I got to plug it one more time. Go to your thing. Go to, whether you listen to Spotify or Apple or whatever, and download an Army of Normal Folks and listen to a couple episodes. Subscribe to it, or go to normalfolks.us. You can subscribe to it there. I think you guys are the right audience for that. So between Undefeated and an Army of Normal Folks, y'all got homework. Y'all got film study. Y'all got film study.
If you want to, I epitomize normal folks. So if you ever need a guest that's average looking, average intelligence, just let me know, because I'm right up that alley. So.
Coach is over there and I'm over here. So we're all in. Hey man, Coach Courtney, if somebody wanted to reach out to you and not have to go through all the rigmarole, where would they find you at on social media?
CoachBillCourtney.com, and I answer it.
Is that info? I think I saw info at Coach Bill Courtney.
Yeah, you go to CoachBillCourtney.com or www.CoachBillCourtney.com, the website, and there's an info tab. If you hit info there, or you go to Coach Bill email there, I will respond to you. I'll respond to everybody that emails.
You do any social media anywhere?
Yeah, at I am Coach Bill on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all that stuff.
Perfect. Coach Simpson, where can we find you at, sir?
All things FB Coach Simpson. So FB Coach Simpson at Gmail. Go to fbcoachsimpson.com and shoot me an email from there, or at FB Coach Simpson on Twitter.
Awesome. I'm at Coach Chambo OK on the Twitter machine. You can email me at chamberlainfootballconsulting@gmail.com. It's Wilt the Stilt's last name. You Google him, you'll find it. You won't find me. I Googled myself one time. I'm not on there. It's great. Gentlemen, it's been a wonderful evening. I was not expecting this when I logged on my vacation. I thought, let's just burn one out. But man, it turned out really, really well. And it's one of those things that we all need to say, but a lot of podcasts and a lot of coaching information is about X's and O's. And I think tonight, we laughed at running power counter, but we didn't talk X's and O's, and we just talked for an hour. So appreciate that.
Have me on next time. I'll do chalk talk with you for 3 hours.
Hey, we'll figure out how to get a chalkboard on here, Coach. We'll do it.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. If it's your first time listening, please subscribe and like us on whatever your listening device is, whether that's Spotify or Apple or Stitcher or SoundCloud or whatever the things are. Jump over to YouTube and hit us up there I think it's at FB Coach Simpson's, where you'll find the podcast on YouTube. But that's it from us, guys. Appreciate it. Thank you so much. Have a great night.